Everything changed in that courtroom the moment the jury returned with their decision. Because while the world expected the walls to close in on Diddy, the outcome proved that in America the only thing separating a man from prison is the voice of 12 strangers, and that voice did not say guilty on the most serious charges. Despite months of investigation, dozens of testimonies, and government pressure, the Southern District of New York failed to lock him up for racketeering and sex trafficking. And yet this was no full exoneration, because Diddy was still convicted of 2 federal crimes related to transporting individuals across state lines for prostitution. And that means even if he escaped the largest legal firestorm of his life, he is still not free, and the storm is far from over. The prosecution pushed hard, they wanted blood, and they nearly got it, but the Mann Act, that century-old law about moral transport, was their last hold on him. And now with the sentencing date set for October 3rd, all eyes are on whether Diddy will get time served or face more years behind bars. His lawyers are moving quickly, asking for an expedited sentencing hearing on July 8th, arguing that he should not be kept in a cage any longer after being cleared of the most damning accusations. But the judge has denied his bail again and again, even after the verdict, and the reason is simple. This is a man who allegedly violated court rules from inside jail by using other inmates' accounts to contact potential witnesses, a direct insult to the authority of the court, and that detail alone could tip the scales when it comes to deciding how much more time Diddy will serve. And the judge, the same one who repeatedly shut down his bail motions, will be the one handing down the sentence. The stakes are huge, because even though he avoided charges that could have kept him behind bars for life, he is still facing up to 20 years under the Mann Act, although the prosecution is asking for just under 4 years, and the defense wants less than 2. And while legal analysts debate the morality and age of the Mann Act itself, noting how it criminalizes actions like calling an Uber for someone crossing state lines for adult purposes, the truth is that it still holds power in federal court, and in Diddy's case, it may become the very law that defines his future. And what complicates everything further is that beyond this criminal case, Diddy now faces a legal minefield of civil lawsuits, including a new bombshell from a former male exotic dancer named Edmond Laurent, who claims Diddy drugged, assaulted, and permanently injured him during a series of hotel encounters in Los Angeles. And the details are chilling. According to Laurent's filing, Diddy and a masked woman lured him into a room, spiked his drink, slathered him in oil, and left him with lasting physical and psychological damage. He says the baby oil was laced with GHB, and that he awoke disoriented, in pain, and eventually had to undergo gastric surgery and dental reconstruction. And he is not alone. Vulture reports Diddy now faces at least 66 civil lawsuits from men, women, and minors, involving allegations of drugging, abuse, and manipulation. And though many of these may never reach a jury, the sheer number is a legal nightmare for any defense team, especially now that Diddy no longer enjoys the full armor of a not guilty verdict. Because although he escaped the most serious charges, the guilty finding on the Mann Act has weakened his shield and given civil lawyers a foothold in court. And this brings us to Dawn Richard, a former Danity Kane band member, who testified that she saw Diddy assault Cassie and was allegedly threatened when she tried to intervene. She claims she too was harassed, and though her cross-examination in the criminal trial was tough, some believe her civil case still has weight, especially because of her direct connection to Diddy's business empire, which could provide evidence of patterns and power structures that courts care about. And the truth is, even if Diddy wins or settles most of these lawsuits, the damage to his reputation, legacy, and fortune is already well underway, with legal fees, settlements, and public backlash all eating away at the empire he spent decades building. And while his money may have come from music, fashion, and branding, and not directly from any crime, the cost of defending his name will likely reach into the tens of millions, and the prosecutors know this, which is why there is quiet discussion behind the scenes about possible asset forfeiture. Though legal experts are skeptical, since Diddy's wealth was earned through legitimate business and not the proceeds of crime like drug trafficking or fraud. Unlike typical RICO targets, there is no clear line between illegal behavior and revenue in this case, but prosecutors may still try to make a symbolic move, even if it does not hold up long-term in court. And meanwhile, Diddy's team is fighting battles on all fronts, trying to delay, postpone, or settle the many lawsuits pending in various states and courts, and one of their strategies may involve forcing plaintiffs to reveal their real names, rather than suing under pseudonyms, which could deter some from moving forward. And there is also the possibility of motions to dismiss or consolidate the lawsuits, but each case has its own facts, its own witnesses, and its own emotional weight. And in civil court, where the burden of proof is lower, the risk is greater, and the consequences just as public. And as all this unfolds, observers are asking the same question: how did we get here? How did one of the most celebrated men in entertainment fall so far so fast? And the answer may lie not just in the accusations or the verdicts, but in the silence of those around him. For years, Diddy was protected by money, power, and a culture of fear. But Now that shield is cracking. Insiders say former staffers, assistants, and even friends are beginning to talk, and investigators are listening. And if even a fraction of what is being alleged proves true, then this saga may be far from over. In fact, it may only be the beginning, because the truth has a way of finding light even in the darkest corners. And as more people step forward and more evidence is uncovered, the question may no longer be whether Diddy will serve time, but whether anyone else in his orbit will be pulled down with him. And that is why this case is being watched not just by fans and media, but by other powerful figures whose names may be whispered in courtrooms and depositions in the months ahead. Because if the tapes exist, if the rumors are true, then the fallout could reach beyond music, beyond Hollywood, even beyond America. And that is what keeps the story alive. Just Diddy's fate, but the possibility that his story is just one chapter in a much larger book of secrets, still waiting to be opened. What happens next could change everything. Because while Diddy may have dodged the harshest legal bullet, the real war is only beginning, and insiders say his legal team is bracing for a tidal wave of financial and reputational fallout as the sentencing date approaches fast, with the defense begging the judge to bring it forward in hopes of capitalizing on the momentum from the partial acquittal and securing leniency before the media firestorm reignites. And prosecutors are already pushing back, reminding the court that this is the same man who used fellow inmates' phone accounts to reach out to potential witnesses, a move that could not only violate court orders, but also suggest a pattern of manipulation that has followed him from luxury mansions to prison walls. And while the sentencing guidelines technically range from 0 to 20 years for his convictions, prosecutors are reportedly asking for just under 4 years, while his defense wants less than 2, pointing out that Diddy has already served nearly 10 months and arguing that he is not a danger to society. But here is where it gets tricky, because federal sentencing in cases like this relies heavily on something called a pre-sentencing report compiled by federal probation officers, who are now speaking with everyone from family members to business partners to assess his character, his remorse, and whether he poses any ongoing risk to the public. And federal judges often follow these reports very closely, using them to guide sentencing decisions. And while the judge has stated that bail rulings should not be seen as a preview of the final sentence, legal experts warn that judges do not forget when a defendant disrespects the court, and Diddy allegedly did just that from inside jail. And even if the sentence ends up being light, the civil lawsuits piling up against him could crush him financially and permanently stain his legacy, because as of now, over 66 people have come forward, accusing Diddy of everything from assault to manipulation. And while none of those claims have yet been proven in court, the volume alone is overwhelming, and each lawsuit represents a new battlefield and a new risk. And one of the most high-profile claims comes from Edmond Lorante, former exotic dancer, who alleges that Diddy drugged him, used him in disturbing ways, and left him with permanent physical and psychological trauma, including damage that required surgery and dental procedures. And Laurent included photographs in his legal filings showing his condition before and after, and his story is eerily similar to others who claim Diddy used baby oil elaborate scenes that blurred the line between consent and coercion. And although some legal analysts question the timing of these lawsuits, others argue that the patterns are too consistent to ignore. And what makes the civil suits even more dangerous for Diddy is the lower burden of proof. Unlike criminal cases, which require guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, civil cases only require a preponderance of the evidence, meaning jurors must believe it is more likely than not that the events occurred, and that is a much lower bar. And with dozens of plaintiffs ready to testify in their own words, in their own time, Diddy and his lawyers are preparing for years of litigation and enormous legal fees. And many suspect that the real goal now is to settle quietly without admitting guilt. But even that has risks, because each settlement could be seen as an admission in the court of public opinion, and Diddy's reputation has already taken massive hits. And legal experts are now debating whether any of these plaintiffs will be allowed to remain anonymous, or if Diddy's team will demand their real names be revealed in court, a move that could intimidate some into dropping their claims or at least slow down the legal process. This tactic has been used before in other celebrity cases with mixed results, and beyond the civil arena, federal investigators are reportedly still digging into whether any of the actions described in the lawsuits could justify new criminal charges. And if that happens, Diddy could be right back where he started, facing a courtroom and a jury and possibly new indictments. And it is not just about him, because other names have already surfaced as being close to the events described in Rock Nation, and others are facing mounting scrutiny after being accused in a separate lawsuit of trying to bribe witnesses and silence testimony. And while Jay-Z himself is not listed as a defendant, the lawsuit argues that as the founder and chairman of Rock, he is ultimately responsible for the actions of his team, and that includes lawyers who allegedly posed as government agents and offered money in exchange for false claims. And if that is proven, it could become one of the biggest legal scandals in music industry history. And some believe this is just the beginning, as the truth continues to unravel and more names get pulled into the fallout. And as for Diddy, his team is expected to begin the next phase of defense by trying to get as many of these lawsuits dismissed as possible, or at least delayed. And legal experts say they may also move to have them heard individually rather than grouped together, to avoid the kind of media circus that could influence juries, and at the same time prosecutors are being urged by some to seize Diddy's assets. But experts say that may not happen because most of his fortune was built through legal business ventures and not through criminal profits. Unlike traditional RICO cases involving drugs or fraud, Diddy's wealth came from music, branding, fashion, and entertainment, and unless the government can prove a direct connection between specific crimes and specific assets, the courts are unlikely to approve broad asset seizures. But even if the government cannot take his wealth, the lawsuits might, because if even a fraction of the plaintiffs win their cases or negotiate settlements, the financial costs could be staggering. And beyond money, Diddy is also facing a personal and professional exile, as sponsors, collaborators, and former allies distance themselves from the controversy, some quietly pulling endorsement, while others publicly denounce the behavior described in the lawsuits. And what once looked like an unshakable empire now looks like a crumbling monument to excess power and alleged abuse. And while Diddy remained defiant, publicly vowing to clear his name, sources close to him say he is shaken, frustrated, and increasingly isolated. And even within his legal team there is concern that more witnesses may come forward and more evidence may surface as the pressure continues to build. And behind the scenes, federal agents are reportedly still reviewing digital files seized during raids on his properties, which included phones, computers, and hard drives. And some believe those devices may contain communications, videos, or records that could open the door to even more charges or new investigations. And meanwhile, the public continues to watch, some hoping for justice, questioning the fairness of a system that so often lets celebrities off the hook. And then there are those who are simply stunned that this man who once stood at the top of music, culture, fashion, and nightlife is now at the center of one of the most disturbing legal sagas of the decade. And with every headline, every court filing, every whispered name, the story grows more complicated and more dangerous for everyone involved. And while Diddy may walk out of jail at some point, his journey back to public acceptance, if that is even possible, will be long, difficult, and uncertain. And some say he may never reclaim his former glory, because too much has changed. The world has changed, and the spotlight that once celebrated him is now exposing him. And no matter how skilled his lawyers may be or how much money he has to fight back, the truth has momentum now, and it will not stop. And that is why this story is not over, because there are still so many unanswered questions, so many sealed documents, so many people who have not yet spoken. And as the lawsuits progress and the courts dig deeper, more names may be revealed, more stories may be told, and the final chapter in the fall of Diddy may be even more explosive than anything we have seen so far. And as always, HollyLeaks will be right here to break it all down.